Some men don't walk into a room, they haunt it. Not with their voice, not with charm, but with silence, with presence. The kind that doesn't beg to be noticed, yet is impossible to ignore. You know the type. He doesn't chase, doesn't overshare. He watches, he listens. He sees through things most people never even pause to question. And it's that, not his intelligence, but his awareness, that unsettles people. Especially women, not all. But enough to ask the question, why does real depth make people uncomfortable? At first, he seems magnetic, mysterious. The kind of man who makes you feel like the world just got quieter around you. But over time, that mystery turns to tension. His stillness begins to feel like scrutiny. His curiosity begins to feel like exposure. You realize he's not just listening, he's seeing you, and not the version you polished for the world, the real one. That's when the retreat begins. Because most people want connection without confrontation. They want love, not revelation. Kierkegaard called it dread, that aching discomfort we feel when the mask slips, when the self is forced to face its reflection. And men like this, they carry that reflection in their presence, in their silence, in their refusal to perform. They're not feared because they dominate. They're feared because they reveal. They don't offer flattery, they offer truth. Not loud, not aggressive, just unfiltered. You don't remember them for their muscles or their money. You remember them because for a second, you felt seen. And maybe that's the scariest thing of all. They don't chase love. They expose what love really is. And that is precisely why most people run. There's a reason intelligent men often feel like outsiders, even in their own lives. It's not that they're antisocial, it's that they've seen too much. They've listened too closely. They've learned to read between the lines, and once you learn to read between the lines, the words themselves lose their charm. They sit in silence at parties, not because they lack things to say, but because small talk feels like static. They don't react to flattery because they've memorized the pattern. Compliment, smile, expectation, manipulation. They know how people present masks, how love, praise, and friendship often arrive gift-wrapped in hidden agendas. Let me ask you something. Have you ever pulled away from someone not because they hurt you, but because they saw too much of you? If any part of you feels that discomfort right now, stay with me, because we're about to unravel what most people spend their whole lives avoiding. We're going deeper, not just into the psychology of intelligent men, but into the reason most relationships can't hold their weight. The truth gets sharper from here. But if you're still with me, then maybe you're ready to face it. Stay until the end. What you find there might not comfort you, but it will change the way you see love, connection, and yourself. Kierkegaard described this internal experience as the sickness unto death, a despair not caused by pain, but by the unbearable clarity of self-awareness. It's the torment of seeing through illusions, of knowing exactly how broken people are, and still choosing to stay awake. This hyper-awareness isn't a superpower. It's a burden. It doesn't make life easier. It complicates it. These men feel everything, but rarely show it. They process, they analyze, they reflect. Emotions don't pass through them quickly. They stop, they sit, they ask why, and the answers often ruin them before they heal them. They become cautious with affection, suspicious of ease, wary of romance that promises without proof. They crave connection, but only the kind that can survive scrutiny, the kind that can stare back at them without blinking. To most, this makes them seem distant, cold, too much in their head, hard to love. What people don't realize is that these men feel so deeply, they've had to build walls just to survive the flood. Emotional predictability, saying the right thing at the right time, is often foreign to them. They speak when they mean it, not when they're expected to. In a world built on social scripts, they refuse to act, and so they're labeled complicated, emotionally unavailable, even intimidating. But here's the truth. They aren't trying to be difficult. They're just not willing to lie, not to others, and certainly not to themselves. This is the psychological terrain they walk, one where honesty costs relationships, and self-awareness breeds loneliness. It's a terrain that rewards silence over performance, reflection over reaction, and that's terrifying to those who thrive on emotional choreography. Because these men don't play by the rules of affection, they rewrite them, quietly, painfully, and most of the time, alone. The desire to know, to feel anchored, to trust that tomorrow won't unravel everything she's built today. From early human history, women, tasked with bearing and nurturing life, were wired to seek stability, not just in their environment, but in their partner's behavior, their decisions, their emotional presence. This is not weakness, it's survival. Predictability meant protection, reliability meant the tribe continued, so over time, attraction developed toward those who could offer more than just a heartbeat. Women began to desire what Carl Jung might call the archetype of the strong protector, the dependable man, the sturdy structure, someone who holds the world still when everything feels like it's falling apart. Enter the intelligent man, not the loud intellectual, not the narcissist hiding behind knowledge, but the quiet thinker, the man whose mind doesn't rest, whose presence feels like a question you don't know how to answer, who doesn't speak often, but when he does, the room shifts. To some, this is magnetic, at first until it's not. Because intelligence, true intelligence, doesn't sit still, it doesn't stabilize, it questions, it dissects, it doubts. And doubt is the enemy of certainty. For many women, this kind of man feels like emotional vertigo. He isn't reckless, yet he's unpredictable. He doesn't chase, yet he sees straight through you. He doesn't promise forever, but he'll show you who you really are, if you let him. And that is terrifying. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's destabilizing. He doesn't follow the emotional script. He might not text back right away, not because he's playing games, but because he's lost in thought. He might not say, "I love you" at the perfect moment, not because he doesn't feel it, but because he questions what love even means. This isn't toxicity, it's depth. But depth without reassurance looks like chaos to someone searching for clarity. The brooding philosopher, the soft-spoken genius, the emotionally unavailable thinker. These are not modern dating archetypes. They are psychological disruptors. They don't provide safety in the traditional sense. They don't calm the storm. They are the storm, internal, quiet, and unrelenting. So many women crave connection, but what they often mean is emotional order, predictable affection, safe rhythms, someone who responds the way they expect, when they expect. An intelligent man, with all his complexity, cannot always offer that. His love isn't a shelter, it's a mirror. And when he reflects what someone's not ready to confront, about themselves, about the world, about love itself, that mirror feels more like a threat than a gift. It's not that these men are unlovable, it's that their kind of love rewrites the script. And not everyone wants to start over. Søren Kierkegaard believed that despair wasn't something external. It wasn't sadness or pain in the conventional sense. He called it a sickness of the self, a misrelation within one's identity, a tension between who we are, who we pretend to be, and who we feel we ought to become. It's not the absence of happiness, it's the absence of wholeness. For the intelligent man, this inner fracture is constant. He doesn't just live life, he dissects it while living it. Every choice, every emotion, every connection must be measured against meaning. Is this love real, or is it convenience? Am I being myself, or am I performing a role that pleases someone else? Kierkegaard described this internal war as the tension between the aesthetic life and the ethical life. The aesthetic life seeks pleasure, novelty, distraction, the surface joys that most of modern society glorifies. The ethical life, on the other hand, demands responsibility, reflection, and sacrifice. It asks you to choose something bigger than yourself, to anchor your freedom in truth. The intelligent man is caught between the two. He sees the illusion of the aesthetic life, how shallow and fleeting it is. But he also fears the gravity of the ethical one. He wants meaning, yet questions whether it's even real. And this existential limbo bleeds into his relationships. He doesn't chase with reckless abandon. He hesitates, not because he lacks passion, but because he knows how passion can blind. He doesn't flatter easily, not because he's arrogant, but because he values authenticity. When he says, "I love you," he wants to mean it with his whole being, and so he often says nothing at all. To someone seeking simplicity, this is maddening. Most people want connection that feels effortless. Fast replies, constant validation, predictable affection. But intelligent men love differently. Their love doesn't come in Instagrammable moments. It comes in questions, in philosophical tangents, in long pauses where they're trying to make sense of what they feel. They don't offer fireworks, they offer a mirror. They offer stillness. They offer the unsettling awareness that this, whatever this is, might mean everything or nothing at all. In a world addicted to dopamine, that kind of ambiguity is intolerable. These men aren't hard to love, they're hard to understand. And in today's world, being misunderstood is often worse than being disliked, because it means never fully being seen. And yet that is the Kierkegaardian trap, to be aware of your own depth in a world that fears depth, to know exactly who you are and still remain invisible. Step back from the individual, from the man, from the woman. Zoom out far enough, and you begin to see it's not just about relationships. It's about a culture that's terrified of depth. We live in an age where the surface is everything. Smiles are curated, lives are filtered, emotions are tweeted and forgotten. The faster you can package your personality into a digestible piece of content, the more value you're assigned. Silence makes people nervous. Complexity makes people suspicious. Introspection is labeled a red flag. In this landscape, intelligent men, especially those who refuse to dilute themselves, become a threat. Not a threat in the physical sense, but in the existential one. They challenge the performance. They disrupt the script. They're not easily impressed. They ask questions that ruin perfectly good illusions, and so they are quickly labeled intense, arrogant, distant, emotionally unavailable, too much, too serious, too weird, sometimes all at once. But what if they're none of those things? What if they're just unwilling to pretend? Mainstream culture doesn't know what to do with introspective men. Look at how they're portrayed. The Joker, a genius driven mad by a world that mocks sensitivity. BoJack Horseman, a deeply self-aware man drowning in nihilism because the world he lives in rewards fakeness. Even Kierkegaard, in his own time, was ridiculed for thinking too much, feeling too much, asking too many questions. It's a pattern, a warning. Society doesn't punish ignorance, it punishes awareness. And women, just like men, are raised in the same culture, taught that emotional stability looks like predictable patterns, taught that silence must be filled, that questioning ruins romance, that overthinking kills the mood. So when an intelligent man walks into their life, they don't see a gift, they see a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. These men don't perform masculinity in the way pop culture tells us they should. They're not chasing status, applause, or dominance. Their strength is quieter, more grounded, less visible. And that invisibility, ironically, makes them look like they're lacking something. They're not lacking, they're just not pretending. But society doesn't reward stillness. It doesn't reward people who opt out of the performance. So intelligent men are sidelined, not because they aren't valuable, but because they won't act valuable in the approved way. This isn't about male suffering in isolation. It's about a systemic discomfort with emotional and intellectual honesty, a fear of the slow, the thoughtful, the real. Intelligent men don't scare women because they're broken. They scare them because they reflect everything the world taught them to run from. Their presence whispers a truth that's hard to bear. That stillness is not emptiness, that complexity is not chaos, and that silence, when not filled with noise, often reveals everything you've tried to ignore. Most relationships are built on emotional intimacy. That's the language we've all been taught to speak, especially women. It's the exchange of feelings, the reassurance of affection, the shared emotional rhythms that build comfort. Tears, laughter, warmth, vulnerability wrapped in emotion. That's how love is usually understood. But intelligent men operate on a different frequency. Not higher, not better, just different. They offer a form of vulnerability that isn't immediately recognizable. One that doesn't always come with open arms or emotional confessions. It comes through ideas, through hesitation, through carefully chosen silences, through late-night questions that pull apart the meaning of love itself. They're not cold. They're not distant. They're just speaking in a language few are taught to hear. Intellectual vulnerability. For them, connection begins not with expression, but with understanding. They don't want to be adored. They want to be known. To be seen not as a collection of gestures, but as a mind unfolding in slow motion. A complexity not meant to impress, but to be explored. This creates a paradox, because while many women are fluent in emotional closeness, they may find this kind of intellectual vulnerability alienating. It doesn't fit the pattern. It doesn't play out like the movies. It lacks the scripted drama of passionate arguments or spontaneous declarations of love. Instead, it asks, do you see the truth of who I am, even when it's uncomfortable? That question is not easy to answer. Society rarely prepares anyone, man or woman, for that kind of connection. It encourages women to be emotionally open, teaches them how to engage with a man who reveals himself through introspection instead of affection, who expresses love not through words but through presence, through observation, through quiet. It feels to some like emotional unavailability, but it's not. It's a different kind of availability, one rooted in thought rather than tone. Kierkegaard believed that to truly love another, the self must first become itself. That means embracing solitude, confronting discomfort, building a relationship not as escape, but as confrontation with who you are. Most people skip this step. They rush into intimacy, hoping that love will complete them. But intelligent men often resist that rush, not because they don't want love, but because they understand its weight. They won't enter it until they've made peace with their own chaos. And that process takes time, sometimes a lifetime. In today's world, where immediacy is mistaken for sincerity, that kind of patience looks like indifference. It's not, it's depth. And in a world trained to mistake noise for connection, that kind of quiet is often misunderstood. Not because it lacks feeling, but because it asks for something most people were never taught to give. Understanding without condition, presence without performance, love without illusion. He's 33, unmarried, doesn't talk much, lives in a small apartment filled with books and paper. His phone is always on silent, not out of rudeness, but because he prefers thoughts that aren't interrupted. He goes to cafes alone, not to socialize, to observe. He notices how people avoid eye contact when they speak, how laughter often covers discomfort, how love in most cases looks like performance dressed up as sincerity. He's brilliant, not in the showy way, not in the kind that makes headlines, but in the way he connects ideas most people overlook. Late at night, he writes, not for a blog, not for an audience, just for himself. Long letters to people who will never read them. Thoughts he knows the world is impatient enough to hear. People call him intense, not because he forces himself on anyone, but because he never plays along. He doesn't chase, he doesn't flatter, he listens, deeply. And that somehow unnerves people more than if he had said too much. Women flirt with him, some even try to love him, but they rarely stay. Not because he's cruel, not because he lacks affection, but because he sees too clearly. One woman once told him, "You make me feel exposed, like you know things I haven't admitted to myself yet." He didn't respond, not out of pride. He just knew that no answer would comfort her, because the truth is, he wasn't trying to expose her. He was simply paying attention. This man, real or not, is the embodiment of the Kierkegaardian dilemma. A soul not designed for noise. A man who doesn't live to impress, but to understand. And in a world obsessed with appearances, that understanding becomes threatening. He's not scary because he's broken. He's scary because he doesn't lie. Not to himself, not to others. He asks questions no one wants to hear. He holds up mirrors no one asked to look into. And that kind of presence, calm, quiet, honest, forces people to confront what they've hidden beneath charisma, routine, and charm. In the end, it's not his mind that isolates him. It's the way it reflects everything the world tries to suppress. And in that reflection, most people don't see him. They only see themselves. Can intelligent men, burdened by inner awareness, haunted by their own perception, ever be truly loved? Not admired, not respected, not tolerated for their silence or intellect, but loved. Loved in a way that doesn't ask them to shrink. Loved in a way that doesn't treat their depth as danger or their mind as a problem to be fixed. The answer is yes, but only by someone who understands that love is not always soft, that sometimes love is the hardest thing in the world because it demands we face ourselves. To love an intelligent man is to step into discomfort, to sit with questions that don't have answers, to be okay with not being constantly entertained or reassured or swept away. It's to find beauty in the stillness, in the silence, in the pause before the thought becomes a sentence. He won't give you the story you're used to. He won't chase you with grand gestures. He won't tell you what you want to hear just to keep you close. He will ask. He will notice. He will see things in you that even you haven't named yet. And if you're not ready for that, if you're still looking for love that keeps you comfortable, you'll leave. Not because he hurt you, but because he didn't play along. Kierkegaard believed that love was not comfort, it was confrontation. It was the soul meeting another and recognizing its own incompleteness. It wasn't about completion, it was about transformation. So the question becomes this: do you want safety or do you want meaning? Do you want someone who follows the script or someone who forces you to rewrite it? Do you want predictability or truth? There is no judgment in your answer, only clarity. Because to love a man who sees through the world is to accept that he'll see through you too. Not to control you, not to expose you, but to meet you where most are too afraid to go. And that kind of love, it's not easy, it's not romantic, it's rare. But for those who are ready, truly ready, it's the only kind of love that will ever feel real. Go back to where we started. The idea that intelligent men are feared, misunderstood, pushed away, not because they cause harm, but because they reveal truth. In a world where almost everything is edited, filtered, and performed, being real is the most dangerous thing you can be. Honesty, especially emotional and intellectual honesty, isn't romanticized. It's resisted because it doesn't flatter, it doesn't seduce, it doesn't play by the rules of social charm. The intelligent man doesn't offer illusion, he offers presence. He doesn't smooth things over, he looks beneath them. He doesn't tell you what you want to hear, he tells you what the silence is saying. And that is terrifying for those who have built entire lives around avoiding that silence. Being this kind of man, deep, aware, honest, is not easy. It's a lonely path. Conversations often feel one-sided. Rooms feel louder than necessary. The world keeps asking you to tone it down, to be more normal, to stop thinking so much. But here's the truth. The world isn't suffering from a lack of charisma. It's suffering from a lack of courage. Courage to feel, courage to pause, courage to choose truth over popularity. If you are someone who has always felt too much, who questions more than you answer, who finds comfort not in noise but in nuance, then this message is for you. You will be misunderstood. You will be feared. You may even be left behind. Stay true anyway. Don't shrink for approval. Don't dilute for acceptance. You are not too much. You are simply living in a world that rewards too little. The world doesn't need more people who know how to play the game. It needs those willing to question it, not with anger, with depth. And in that quiet rebellion, there is something more powerful than love or success. There is meaning, and meaning once found is worth every mile walked alone. If you've made it this far, you're not like most people. You're not afraid of questions that don't have easy answers. You're not here for surface-level truths or feel-good illusions. You're here because something in this spoke to you, maybe even unsettled you, and that's the point. So if this made you think and made you feel, don't let it end here. Subscribe, because these aren't just videos. They're mirrors. Comment your thoughts. What part hit you the hardest? What truth did you recognize but never dared to say out loud? Like the video if it gave voice to something you've always felt but never fully understood. This space is for those who feel too much, think too deeply, and refuse to settle for a world that fears both. Because the more we speak what others run from, the more we find those who've been silent for far too long.